I was able to buy my first investment property at the age of 23 whilst working full time. But the story really wasn't very straightforward. There were so many different twists and turns. So today I want to tell you a little bit more about what exactly happened. So the story kind of begins in December 2023. So at this point, I'd been working at my private equity job for about a year and a half, and I'd received a bonus, I'd saved up a fair amount of money. So I discussed with my dad the idea of investing into a property to get rental income. So the most simple form of property investment you can do is what is called a turnkey buy-to-let. And that's when you buy properties that are pretty much good to go, in the sense that as soon as you got the keys, you could pretty much start trying to rent it out to people immediately. What makes these things so attractive is the simplicity. You can start getting rent pretty much the very second that you've actually purchased the property. However, the simplicity is also the downside in terms of the returns you make. Because the property is already good to go and is already in a very good condition, you can't really increase the value of the property yourself. The other type of property investment that you can still do as a beginner but is a little bit more advanced are properties that require a bit of refurbishment. And what I mean by that are these properties aren't in a condition for you to immediately rent out. You might need to do a little bit of work, for example, doing up the kitchen or redoing the floors or something like that. As a result, it takes longer for you to actually start renting this property because you actually need to spend time doing up the property first, and you need to invest more money because it's not just the purchase price of the house, but you also have to spend money actually doing up the house as well. Because you've got to spend that additional time, effort, and investment into actually renovating the house, it means that you can actually purchase the house oftentimes for a significant discount to what other houses that are in a good condition are selling for. And that means there's an opportunity for you to make an additional return by increasing the value of the property. Just as an example, imagine you spent £20,000 doing up the house, but the value of the property increased by £50,000, then you've kind of netted £30,000 in profit. So after completing a lot of in-person property viewings, admittedly, they were all done by my dad because I was in London, we jointly arrived at a property that we both liked the look of, and we submitted an offer, and it was for around about £170,000. And the reason why we liked the property so much was because it was in a good part of Leicester where there were strong rental yields, but also the property itself, although it had a lot of work to be done, had some really attractive features about it. So it was 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, which is pretty rare. Normally you only find one, or a lot of times you only find one. And also the loft had been converted. So there was potentially an option for us to convert that into a 4th bedroom, which would again increase the potential rent that we'd get on the place. Once that offer was accepted, we then have to move into actually going through the logistics of completing that deal. So what does that actually mean? It means doing all the legal paperwork and filling out a bunch of documents, but probably more importantly is getting your financing. So here's a bit of debt financing or mortgages 101 for you. So when it comes to residential properties, so those are properties that you buy to actually live in, you can get mortgages where all you have to put down is a 10% deposit. But that's not the case when it comes to investment properties. There, the minimum deposit in most cases is 25%. So on a £170,000 purchase price, we would have had to put down, I think it's 42.5K. That was fine, but that meant that the remaining £127,500 would need to be financed via a mortgage. It turns out that the property that we'd invested in was in such bad condition that it wasn't actually deemed habitable. And so as a result, it didn't qualify for a mortgage. And so all of a sudden, my dad and I had to scramble up an additional 130K or so to actually buy this property. It actually took us so long to be notified or for us to figure out that this house wasn't eligible for a mortgage that the original seller decided to move on with our offer and actually put the property up for auction. But because my dad and I liked this property so much, and also because we'd put in so much work, we decided that actually we were going to go to the auction and try buy the same property there. We ended up actually picking the property all in after auction costs and other fees for, I think it was £164,000. So actually we kind of made a £6,000 saving. My dad had decided that he was going to loan, I guess, the money from one of his other businesses. So that's how we went about funding the £130,000 that we were previously short. Without him, not only with providing the funding, but generally just doing so much of the grunt work whilst I was in London, this deal would not have been possible. So I'm super, super grateful to him. So there were so many things that we didn't realize or we didn't know until we were actually in the process of buying the property. And one of those things was that because the property was in a non-habitable condition, I also think that it was eligible for a lower rate of stamp duty, or maybe in fact no stamp duty whatsoever. Once we closed on the property and actually got over the keys, that was when the work began to actually refurb the thing. And again, admittedly, I benefited a lot from my dad's experience and set of contacts in Leicester, because he knew people that I just didn't, in terms of builders and contractors who were able to actually assist with getting the work done. Now, of course, the refurb's only really worth it if you can increase the value of the property by more than the refurb costs. We ended up actually just talking to the neighbour of our property a little bit, and they were saying that when they'd got a valuation in, their valuation was at, I think it was £230,000 to £240,000. Our overall expenses on the property came to about £190,000, which meant that if we were to then sell the property on for £230,000 to £240,000, we could have made between 40 to 50k profit before any kind of expenses, I guess, from selling. In a lot of cases, what people would do at that point, once they have a known valuation of £230,000 to £240,000, would be to mortgage the property. And as I mentioned before, you can get up to 75% of the property's value as a mortgage. So on £240,000, we would have been eligible for £180,000. What you then are able to do is utilize that £180,000 to effectively then go and buy another property and try and repeat the exact same process again. And quite honestly, we probably will do this method once we find the next property that we actually want to buy. Speaking of which, we've actually got a property viewing to go and do now. So let's go and check that out.
So look at the wall, the side walls. Definitely it needs some work. And then look at the roof. There is a gap between the tiles. You can clearly see that. It's a crack in the wall.
Big crack. It's a lot of work.
Yes.
A lot of work, but that's
100%. You need to replace the kitchen though. You need a new kitchen, new boiler, new bathroom, 3-piece.
All right, back to where this video began. But that kind of concludes the story of how we purchased this property, our thoughts, our rationale during the process. If you have any questions, be sure to let me know in the comment section down below and I will do my best to answer them. Let me know what else you'd like to see in the video. And if you want to see my take on whether to buy versus rent in London in 2025, go check out this video here. If not, in the meantime, go and like, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next video.